My name is Pamela Thorne. I'm 69 years old, and after everything I've been through, I thought nothing else could shake me. But tell me, what would you do if someone whispered something about your own child that contradicted everything you believe? Something so unexpected, so out of place, that for a moment you feel the ground slipping away, but still try to convince yourself that it's just a mistake? Well, that's exactly what happened to me on that ordinary Saturday, when I just wanted to buy a simple cake for family lunch. I know that this feeling of strangeness is not only mine. All of us, at some point in life, have felt that discomfort that grows in the chest when something doesn't fit, when a word seems too heavy, when a doubt tries to be born where before there was only trust. And I know that just like me that day, many people try to push away this thought, trying to protect their hearts from what may come. But in this story, I'm going to tell you what happens when we decide not to ignore this silent call, when we take a deep breath, even with fear, and choose to observe. In the end, you'll understand exactly why that whisper changed my entire life, and that's where it all starts. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. That morning, everything seemed normal. I just wanted to buy a simple muffin, the kind you take for a Sunday lunch, you know? But it only took one sentence, said almost in secret, there at the supermarket checkout, for everything inside me to change. "You're Michael Thorne's mother, right?" I confirmed, without thinking. And what came next? God knows. Those words, that look of the man. It seemed like he wanted to warn me of something I never imagined hearing about my own son. That's why, instead of going straight to the car, I hid behind 2 containers in the parking lot. And there, behind the cars, what I saw with my own eyes almost made me fall. I'll tell you everything. But first, if this story has ever touched a corner of your heart, if you feel that, somehow this can happen to any of us. So leave a like here so I know I'm not alone, and if you can, sign up too. I'm opening up something very intimate today, and knowing that you're here with me gives me the courage to keep going. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The simple house where Michael grew up smelled of hot bread and cheap disinfectant. I did what I could. She cleaned houses during the day, sewed at night, and on Sundays sold dumplings at the market. That's how I held everything, and I never complained. Because when I looked at his face, so small and so full of questions, I felt that it was all worth it. Michael has always been a sweet, intelligent boy, one of those who ask for a blessing before going to sleep, and help carry the groceries without anyone asking. He was my pride, my only one. We grew up together, me and him, because after I lost his father in a construction accident in the middle of winter, I was thrown headlong into a world I didn't know. I had to learn to do everything myself, but God gave me strength. And Michael, even without understanding, grew up seeing his mother standing, even tired, even without help. He said, "One day I'll give you everything back, Mom." And I believed it, because I saw sincerity in his eyes. And that fed me more than any plate. When he passed the state college, it was the greatest pride of my life. I sold the sewing machine to buy his first laptop, and I remember that he cried when he saw it. She hugged me tight and said, "You're all I have, Mom." I kept this phrase inside my chest as if it were a medal, and whenever life got tough, I repeated it to myself, because deep down, I also thought he was all I had. It was in college that he met Emily. She was unlike anything I knew. Beautiful, too neat, the daughter of a certain Robert who worked with investments in Chicago. At first, I confess, I felt a certain discomfort. It was as if that girl was always with a rehearsed smile, a presence that made me uncomfortable. But I swallowed that, because who am I to disturb my son's happiness? I preferred to keep the doubt to myself. Over time, the small orders began. Michael said that Emily was worried about her father, that he needed expensive medicines, which the insurance companies did not cover. I helped with the little I had. Sometimes I sent $50, $100, even though I knew that it could leave me without buying my medicines that month. But he did, because Michael said, "It's just this month, Mom. We'll settle down." And I said, "Amen," because trusting was easier than doubting. Then came the request to help with gas, with the energy bill, with the rent that suddenly went up. And I did, whenever I could. Not out of obligation, but out of love. We do this for our children, right? We turn around, we cut our own plate to put food in theirs. And I thought, if it's to relieve my son's pain, I'll do it. There were times when he told me that he was tired, overloaded at work, and I was small-hearted. I told him to be patient, to trust in God, and at the end of the month, even with the retirement barely enough for the basics, I found a way, because in some way, helping made me feel present in his life. It made me feel useful. But now, looking back, I ask myself, did I really see what was happening? Or did I prefer to cover my eyes so as not to lose that little piece of love that was still left? It's hard to accept that, sometimes, what we call love, it's just fear of being alone. I wanted to ask something to those who are listening to me now. Have you ever felt that? This mixture of love, doubt, and silence? Of wanting to believe but deep down feeling that something is not right? If so, write here in the comments, I've lived it, or just touched me. Because look, there are things that only we who have been through understand. Emily has always been polite to me, but she has never been one of hugs, of affection, of those things that warm the heart. Their house was beautiful, modern, full of expensive things, but cold, and I always arrived with a muffin, with a handmade dishcloth, with a desire to belong. They thanked him, of course, but it was as if I was a visitor, never family. Even so, I kept believing. He continued to love. He continued to trust, because that was my way, because that's how I survived so far. But everything started to change the day I went to buy that cake, and I heard that phrase that still echoes in my ears. The phrase that opened a wound, but also turned on a light that I didn't know existed. And it was because of that light that I decided to observe. But what I saw, my God, it was much worse than I could have imagined. Would you be ready to see something that can break your deepest confidence? Because that's what happened to me. And what came next? It still keeps me up at night. The line was even short that Saturday, but everything in me seemed slow. I had slept badly. The ankle hurt more than usual, and the head was full. When I got to the cashier, I was already holding the folded bills in my purse pocket. The ones we keep for something special, even if this special is just a simple cake to take to Sunday lunch. My card failed, as I had already imagined, and I handed over the notes in silence. That's when he looked at me. The cashier was a gentleman with a serene face, steady hands, a tired expression of someone who has seen it all. But at that moment, he stopped. He looked at my name on the receipt, then stared at me as if he knew something I didn't. "You're Michael Thorne's mother, aren't you?" he asked in a low tone, almost as if he were testing some memory. I smiled without understanding and nodded. He took a deep breath, stretched the note, but held my arm gently. "In a suit, he comes here directly with his wife, that elegant blonde." My heart raced, because yes, it was him. "Michael, they're not what they seem," he said, his voice cracking with pity. And then he let go of my arm and went back to work, as if nothing had happened. My world stopped there. I stared at him, at the note in my hand, not knowing what to think. It was as if a sentence had opened a hole in my day, a cold, deep, endless hole. I walked to the exit, but instead of going straight to the car where Michael was waiting for me, I turned left, went through the side door, and went to the back of the grocery store. I needed to breathe, but deep down, I already knew that it wasn't just that. There was something throbbing inside me, something between distrust and shame, a strange weight, an intuition that has never failed me. Behind the containers, among paper bags and crumpled cardboard boxes, I trembled. I leaned on a crate and took a deep breath. And it was there, behind all that garbage, that my eyes saw something that I still try to forget today, something that no one would expect, but that I needed to see with my own eyes. Are you ready to find out what a mother saw and never saw again? Because I saw it, and that changed everything. I lowered my body carefully, hiding behind the large containers that were near the supermarket's loading dock. The floor was dirty, smelled of wet cardboard and sour vinegar, but I didn't care. I never imagined myself in that position, a lady of almost 70, cowering like a child, looking through the gaps of garbage, but something inside me said I couldn't leave, that I needed to see. My heart was beating so hard that I could feel the pulse in my temples. My bag slipped off my shoulder, my knees hurt, but I held on. The side entrance gave a direct view of the parking lot, and from there, I could see the movement of people. 5 minutes, 10, and then he appeared. Emily's father-in-law, Robert. I recognized him from afar, even without having much contact. He was more flushed. He seemed too healthy for someone who, months ago, needed money to buy urgent heart medicine. He was carrying 2 black bags from the Whole Harvest store, the one with organic products and expensive wines, where I myself have never entered, because just by looking at the window, we know that it is not a place for simple people. Robert walked with calm, almost elegant steps. He was dressed in a light blue dress shirt, polished shoes, and a gleaming watch on his wrist. I swallowed. He opened a car with a remote control, a new white SUV, one of those brands that only doctors or lawyers buy here. The car still had the dealership's label on the back window. He put the bags in the back seat, sat in the driver's seat, and started the engine unhurriedly. I closed my eyes for a moment. My stomach turned. Months ago, Michael called me saying that Emily's father was feeling sick, unable to pay for tests and medications. And I, even without power, sent $100. It was the week I had to cut my own pressure pills in half to make it work. I believed it. I believed because I trusted those who asked me. I believed it because it was my son. But now, seeing that man with that car, those expensive bags, that watch, something in me came crashing down. I felt like a fool, as if all the effort of my life had been spat out in silence, without anyone needing to say a word to me. And the worst, it was not yet all. What happened minutes later showed me that this lie was bigger than I imagined. Much bigger. Can you imagine what I saw next? Because the truth was still just beginning to come out, and it came heavy. I stood there, crouching behind that container, as if the whole world had stopped. I could only hear my heart, and each beat seemed to ask, "How come you haven't seen it before, Pamela?" It was there, in that heavy silence, that the memories began to parade in my head, one by one, as if they had been waiting for this moment to shake me. I remembered the burgundy dress that Emily wore to Michael's birthday dinner. She said she had won it from a friend from college, but the tag still dangled discreetly on the cuff of her sleeve. It was from a fine store in Chicago, one of those that just looking at the window makes you embarrassed to enter. There was also perfume, a sweet and expensive smell, which made me sneeze. When I asked, she smiled and said it was a free sample, and I, silly, believed it. The renovation in the kitchen was another thing that now, remembering, makes my stomach churn. From one week to the next, they changed the cabinets, put marble in the sink, a new refrigerator that shines like a mirror. Promotion, they said. Gift from Emily's mom. But that kitchen cost more than my entire car. And yet, the next month, Michael called me for help with the rent. I cried in the bathroom after hanging up. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I had to choose between paying for my blood pressure medication or sending him the $120 he needed. And I sent it. I sent it because I trusted. Because she has a mother's love for that. She believes it even when the whole world has doubted it. Every memory that came was a blow. The excuses always seemed so well rehearsed, as if they had a script ready for every question I asked. "We are going through a difficult phase," he said. "Emily has an anxiety crisis. The insurance didn't cover it. The father-in-law had to sell the car." It all seemed so convincing, so organized. And now, seeing that healthy man getting out of an expensive SUV, everything that seemed solid began to crumble. And it is difficult to explain this pain to those who have never been there, because it's not just about money, it's about trust, about knowing that you were used by the one person you thought would never do that. And I just wanted to believe, but the truth was there, rubbing my face on the dirty asphalt behind a container. It was no longer just a feeling, it was a fact. It was proof. And yet, even with all this, a part of me still wanted to find an explanation that would clear his name from my son. But with each memory, that hope withered a little more. If you're here listening to me, I ask, from the heart, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I'm here opening my heart, telling my story with all the pain that still lives in me. And just knowing that there's someone on the other side listening, it helps me to move on. And if this story is touching you in any way, because I still have a lot to tell. Something that was stuck in my throat for years. At that moment, behind the supermarket, something in me changed. I was no longer the same mother who swallowed everything for fear of losing. No, I felt a strange force born there, a desire to understand how far this lie went. And that's why I didn't go back to the car. There was still more to see, and what happened next. It was the final blow I didn't expect. Can you believe that 2 strangers, whom I have never seen in my life, have just confirmed everything without even knowing that they were helping me? And I heard every word. Behind the garbage, with his heart in his hand. When I saw that man return to the car so calmly, as if nothing in the world could touch him, I felt a knot in my chest. Robert adjusted the bags in the passenger seat, started the engine, and stood there, waiting. He looked at his cell phone, smiled out of the corner of his mouth, a safe, peaceful smile, one of those that only those who have everything in order are able to give. And there I was, hidden, breathing the smell of old garbage, with a heavy soul. After about 2 minutes, I saw a young man approach. He wore a market cleaning uniform, a faded gray t-shirt with the name Thomas embroidered on the chest. He was young. He looked exhausted, with a sweaty forehead and the posture of someone who had lived all day before lunch arrived. The two greeted each other like old acquaintances. They talked intimately, laughing at something I couldn't hear. But what came next? Oh my God. Robert opened his wallet. A genuine leather wallet, one of those that you feel the value of just by seeing. And he pulled out 3 50 bills. $150. She bent it right and put it in the boy's hand with a light slap on the shoulder, like someone who tips out of sympathy, like someone who has plenty of it. That was more than a scene. It was a stabbing, because the week before, Emily had called me crying. He said that his father was sick again, that the plan did not cover an urgent exam, that Michael was working overtime to cover the basics, and that any help would be a relief. I hung up the phone and went straight to the metal safe in the kitchen cabinet. There was some change there that I kept for the emergency. I took $80. That was what I had left after the medicines. But I did. I sent it because I'm a mother. I sent it because I felt guilty that I couldn't do more. And now, to see that man tipping 50 like someone throwing popcorn to pigeons, it left me groundless. It was as if the truth was screaming in my face. They lied. They used me. And they were laughing at it. That tip was the proof I needed. The lie was no longer suspicious. It was fact. Cold, calculated, cruel. I stood there motionless, feeling my throat close. I didn't cry. Not yet. It was as if my body knew that the worst was yet to come. And it was. Because when that white car pulled out of the parking lot, he didn't leave alone. And what I saw, in the sequence, still haunts me to this day. Do you have any idea what it's like to see someone you love condone all this? Well, prepare your heart, because that's when the pain became certainty. That part of the parking lot led straight to a wide stone sidewalk, where the shopping carts were scattered. I was still behind the container, trying to organize everything I had seen, when I heard 2 female voices approaching, talking loudly, without filter, as if knowing that no one is paying attention. I cringed a little more, holding my breath. 2 ladies, perhaps my age or even younger, pushed their carts and spoke with that gossipy enthusiasm that we recognize from afar. "Did you see Emily's look at Sunday brunch?" said one, laughing. The other replied on the spot. "That dress of hers doesn't go for less than $400. I saw it just like it at Nordstrom last week." My chest froze. Emily? Brunch? Designer dress? I kept listening, unable to blink. The first lady said, "She had a glass in her hand, all possessed, and that room was a luxury. My grandson set up the LED screen for her father's birthday. They said it was an open bar with French wine and everything." The other added, "It's a natural flower on every table. Fine party indeed. There was even a buffet with a hired chef." My stomach turned. I recognized that kind of description, because it was the exact opposite of my life. It was the kind of luxury that never fit in my world. And now, to think that all this ostentation was supported, in part, by my spare change, for my sacrifices. It was too much to bear. I remembered the month when I had to heat the house with just a blanket because the gas was going to expire, and I chose to help with their rent. I remembered the time I sold an old necklace from my mother to pay for the repair of Michael's car, which he said was the only way to go to work. What now? Now I heard 2 strangers talk about Emily as if she were a socialite, welcoming guests with French wine and imported flower arrangements. Every sentence of the ladies was a stab. Not because they made fun of me. They didn't even know I existed. And that's when it hurt the most. They knew more about my daughter-in-law than I did. They knew more about my family's life than I did. And they talked about it as if describing a beautiful film, not knowing that, on the other side of the screen, there was a real woman, bent knees and heartbroken, realizing that she was deceived in plain sight. Sometimes, the worst pain is not the lie. It's realizing that it was public while you lived in the dark. And at that moment, looking at the sidewalk and hearing their laughter walking away, I understood that I had been made a fool of, not once, but for years. I know it sounds like a lot, but I swear to you, it's still not the worst. What awaits me, and what I'm going to tell you, is something that no mother expects to hear. That's why, if you've made it this far, stay with me until the end, because there is a part of this story that changes everything. But that Saturday, everything began to change inside me, and I knew that when I got into that car, I wouldn't leave the same anymore. But what I didn't know, that's what Michael was going to tell me, and that's when the masks started to fall, one by one. When I came out from behind those containers, my legs were stiff. The soul, then, seemed to be made of stone. I walked towards the car slowly, as if every step was a decision. Michael was in the driver's seat, with his radio on quietly and his face calm. When he saw me coming, he smiled, that usual smile, the same one who, for so many years, brought me peace. "It took a while, Mom. Was the line that long?" he asked, adjusting his sunglasses. I replied with a vague nod and mumbled something about the cashier being slow. I got in the car, closed the door, and for a moment stared at my own hand on my lap. She was shaking a little. Michael started and we followed. The streets of Grand Rapids looked grayer that day. Or maybe it was just me who was seeing everything differently. On the way, I took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't accuse or demonstrate anything yet, but he needed to test the waters. "What about Robert?" I asked casually, as if wanting to start a conversation. "Are you in better health?" Michael didn't hesitate. "Yes, Mom, but it still needs monitoring. You know, faint heart, a lot of stress." The answer came too quickly and over-rehearsed. I was silent. Emily said he didn't want to go to brunch on Sunday. I continued. I was surprised. I thought he enjoyed these meetings. Michael laughed lightly. "Oh, he was tired." But she went with her mother. The friends organized everything. Simple. Just among acquaintances. My stomach turned. Simple? French wines, professional decor, $400 dress? I knew it. I had already seen the other side. And now, each lie told lightly wounded me like a nail driven in slowly. "Have you been working hard, son?" I ventured. He nodded. "Direct overtime. The company is squeezing." I turned my face to the window. And that's when the doubt was born inside me, in the cruelest way possible. Doesn't he see? Is it being manipulated? Or does he participate in all this? This question hit my chest so hard that I was short of breath for a second. My son, my sweet boy, the same one who said he would take care of me when I grew up. Would he have become an accomplice in this whole theater? I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. So I tried to convince myself. Maybe he is also blind, as I was. Maybe Emily is smarter than we think. But the knot was already tied. And worse, he grew. You know, there are things that only a mother feels. It cannot be explained. It's like a crack that opens in the soul. And from there comes a hard light, which shows what we would rather not see. And if you're listening there, you've been through this, for this feeling that something is wrong, but you love too much to accept. Right here in the comments. I understand you. Or just, I know how it is. Because this pain, this doubt, it's too lonely for us to keep alone. That conversation in the car was short, but for me, it was long enough to change everything. The way he blinked, the way he avoided the rearview mirror when talking about his father-in-law, nothing was the same. And I felt that it was just the shell, that what was underneath was going to hurt me a lot more. And that's why, when I arrived at their house and saw Emily open the door with that smile, I knew. I knew that that afternoon still held something that I wasn't prepared to discover. And I found out, but not from her mouth. I discovered it in the cruelest way there is. Listening, unintentionally, to what was never for me. Their house looked like something out of a magazine. From the front door to the smell coming from the kitchen, everything was too beautiful, too organized, too perfect. That caused me a discomfort that I could no longer disguise. Emily opened the door in a new floral dress, impeccable makeup, hair brushed with that sheen of someone who just left the salon. She gave me 2 quick kisses and a wide smile, as if the world was at peace. "I'm glad you came, Pamela," he said, as I entered. My eyes swept across the bright room. New carpet, decorative pillows swapped, a vase of fresh flowers on the coffee table. I immediately remembered the comment of the neighbors in the market. That was not a financial crisis scenario. It was a showcase. And she was just another spectator. Michael appeared soon after, smiling. She hugged me tightly, calling me my queen, as she did as a teenager. I almost melted at that gesture, but soon the smell of the wine he was holding in the glass woke me up. It was a full-bodied, expensive red. I recognized it by the bottle on the countertop. In the kitchen, Robert was wearing an apron, smiling as if he had prepared all this. "Today was my chef's day," he joked. I sat slowly, observing every detail of the table set with silver cutlery, thin glasses, linen napkins, a salad of noble leaves, baked with sweet and sour sauce, dishes decorated as restaurant. It was Sunday lunch, but it looked like Christmas dinner. During the meal, everything sounded false. Emily said that she had gotten a promotion on a discount site, that the flower shop gave her a gift because she is a loyal customer, that the dress was an exchange that became big luck. Each justification is more outlandish than the other, and I smiled, silent. Each bite descended me like a stone. Michael looked at her in awe, as if she were a circus performer balancing plates. I wondered, does he really believe in all this? Or does he pretend along because he doesn't know how to get out of it anymore? The worst of all was to see how naturally they lied, as if they were so used to it that they no longer saw a problem. I remembered the day when Michael and I ate rice with boiled egg, sharing a Coca-Cola only on special dates. I counted coins to pay for school supplies, and he pretended he didn't want the new sneakers so he wouldn't see me cry. And now, he was pouring me a $70 wine, with a look that seemed to say, "See how I won." But that was not victory. It was staging. And there, sitting at that beautiful table, I felt like the most displaced person in the world, not for lack of money, but for having been deceived, for having become only the hidden pocket of a life that no longer included me. But it was in that silence, with my fork suspended and my chest tight, that something began to be born in me, a decision. I couldn't keep pretending. I could no longer accept this role of blind supporting actor in the history of my own family. Something was wrong, and if no one else had the courage to say it, I would have, even if it hurt, even if it cost me the only thing I had left. And it was with this feeling that after lunch I went to the bathroom just to breathe peacefully, and it was there, behind that closed door, that I heard, which I should never have heard, a conversation, low, rapid, but that changed everything, everything. Have you ever heard a phrase that tears your soul in half? Because that's what happened to me, and that's what I'm going to tell you in the next part, because it was there that the truth screamed. That afternoon, after I returned from lunch, I sat for hours in the armchair in the living room. I didn't even turn on the TV. I didn't even make tea. I just stood there, in silence, with my body still and my head boiling. I knew that, from then on, I couldn't pretend I couldn't see it anymore. But I also understood that there was no point in talking to anyone yet. Not with Michael, not with the neighbors, not with the pastor of the church. That truth was mine, only mine, and I needed to be sure. For the first time in many years, I didn't cry. I didn't ask for explanations. I got up early the next day, tied my hair with an old bobby pin, and opened my closet. I took out the blue hardcover notebook where I wrote down recipes in the 90s. I separated some sheets. Then I went to the closet in the hallway, took the box with old bills, invoices, and finally turned on the old computer that Michael gave me about 5 years ago, the one I only used to watch Mass online. I started typing slowly. Robert Wilson Financial Advice, Grand Rapids. 2 sites appeared. One of them was just a basic card with an address, 201B, Plaza Valley Center, Suite 128. I played it on Google Maps. It was a post office box in a shopping center of cheap stores, next to a laundromat and a bankrupt accounting office. My heart beat faster. There, in that small room rented by the hour, was where Robert said he consulted for large companies. It was from there, according to Emily, that the small and irregular payments that barely paid for the medicines came from. I stared at the screen for a while and could only say, lie. The word came out dry, alone, and it echoed in the room. I took the pen and wrote down the address in the notebook. Underneath I wrote, lie number 1. That week, I became another. Every word Michael spoke on the phone, I wrote down. Every sentence that Emily published in the family group, I reread 1,000 times. I started writing down times when Robert went out, days when Emily said she was sick but posted photos with makeup on at brunch with her friends. I connected the dots with a calmness that even scared me. It wasn't anger. It was focus. For the first time, I felt in control of my own pain. I knew I didn't have the money, the clout, or the physical strength I had before, but I had eyes, and memory, and one thing they underestimated: silence. They counted on my fragility. They counted on my kindness, but they forgot that a woman betrayed in silence sees more than many imagine. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think, because I still have a lot to tell you. A lot indeed. During the days that followed, the notebook took shape. It became my safe. I wrote everything that made sense to me, or didn't. Dates, names, small incongruities, an expensive gift that appeared out of nowhere. A trip that they said was a gift from the mother-in-law, a medical examination that never existed. I even began to remember expressions that Emily used. Slang, tones of voice, the way she avoided eye contact when I asked about her father. It was like putting together a puzzle in the dark, but each piece that fit made me more sure that I wasn't crazy. I had only taken a long time to wake up. And it was like this, with this notebook hidden in the drawer of the nightstand, that I began to discover what no one had ever had the courage to tell me. But the more I found out, the more one question tormented me. What if Michael knows everything? What if he's part of it? I needed to know. And for that, I was going to have to get closer, pretend to believe, and ask for help. And that's what I did. And what he replied to me, it gave me goosebumps from head to toe. Do you have any idea what happens when a child starts slipping into lying, without realizing that the mother already knows everything? And that's when the truth began to show itself without any shame. The following Saturday, I went to the tea at the Methodist church, as if nothing was happening. I put on my lilac linen dress, put on a light lipstick, and took a jar of shortbread cookies, the kind I make when the heart is heavy. I knew Lisa Hammond was going to be there. I had heard about her from the other sisters in the congregation. A civil lawyer, serious, discreet, and with a generous heart. I wasn't sure how to start, but what I carried in my chest no longer fit only me. I sat next to her, on the second wooden bench in the social hall, and between one sip of tea and another, I let go. Not names, nor dates, but the essence of pain. Imagine that a mother, out of love, helps her son and daughter-in-law, one money here, another there. Sometimes they even stop buying their own medicine. He thinks he's saving a family, but then discovers that maybe it was all staged. Lisa looked at me, unhurried, a gentle silence. Then he said, if there was financial manipulation, mainly based on lies, it can have legal consequences. That moved me. I, who have never entered a court in my life, felt a new courage. I asked for a more reserved conversation. She accepted. She said she would receive me in her office on Tuesday, free of charge. It's part of my faith too, Mrs. Pamela, she said, and that warmed me up inside. On Tuesday, I took my blue notebook. Every page, every number, every remark scribbled with shaky handwriting. Lisa read it with the attention of someone who does not underestimate. Calculator in hand, highlighter pen, organized folder. With each receipt I took out of my purse, she looked at me differently, not with pity, but with respect. And when we added all up, I had to sit down. $38,412. That was the value. What I've given, borrowed, paid, and covered over the past 6 years. This amount would be enough for a down payment on the house, for an entire medical treatment, or to ensure their old age with dignity, she said. I could only think, and I still thought it was little. Lisa explained to me that if the intention to manipulate based on falsehood is proven, there could be liability. But the most important thing, at that moment, was that they still didn't know that I knew. That's your trump card now, she said. And at that moment, something turned inside me. I was no longer just the betrayed mother. I was someone with the truth in my hands, and with something they didn't expect, a chance to react. And if you're thinking this was the peak of the story, just wait, because what was still going to happen? within that same week. It was the twist that even Lisa didn't foresee. Do you know when God moves pieces that you didn't even know were on the board? And it was a call, out of nowhere, that changed everything. A voice trembling on the other end of the line, an unexpected call for help, and with it, the truth began to crumble inside the house itself. Have you ever thought, if the person you have protected the most is precisely the one who most needs to be saved from themselves? Well, that was the question I had to face, eye to eye, and no more time to escape. I returned home with that mixture of courage and open wound, and that night I hardly slept. I kept turning over memories like someone leafing through an old book looking for an answer. When the sun had barely risen, I went straight to the closet in the hallway, the one I always avoided opening because it kept more than things. It kept pieces of me. I pulled out the brown cardboard box that smelled of time and dust. I sat on the cold floor of the living room and started to take everything out slowly, as if each envelope could hurt if I pulled too fast. There were deposit receipts that I made at the ATM on the corner, manual receipts for purchases that I signed tremblingly, notes written by Michael and Emily with that rehearsed kindness that moved me at the time. I picked up one of them, a small card with hurried letters. "Thanks for the help with the gas, Mom. You always save us." The other, written by Emily, said, "Dad will be able to take the exam thanks to you." At that time, I believed every word. I read that and felt that somehow I was still necessary. I was still part of that family that I sweated so hard to build. But that day, each sentence became a burden. I read and reread, and what once moved me now hurt like a hot iron. And yet I kept going. I organized everything into piles: deposits, purchases, emergency aid, bill payments. I put dates, made notes, put everything together with elastic. The more I organized, the more I understood that the past was screaming what I didn't want to hear in the present. And as I separated the papers, a piece of me remembered that boy Michael, in the old school uniform, leaving notes on my desk saying, "Mom, one day I'll give you the world." And for a second my eyes watered, stopped, breathed. I felt that tightness that only memory knows how to provoke. Funny how some memories mark us as a tattoo, right? And if you who are listening to me also have a memory like this, one of those that are kept like an old perfume, good or bad, write here in the comments. It can be, "I remember, I felt this," anything. Just so I know that I'm not talking to myself in this corridor of time that sometimes swallows us. I followed Lisa's guidance. I scanned everything, every ticket, every yellowed paper, every bank transfer clipping. I made copies in 2 different folders and saved them on a USB stick that I hid inside the cover of the Bible, because I knew that no one would touch it. Then I put everything back in the blue notebook. It has become almost a war diary, but not a war of fighting. It was a war of silence, of dignity, of truth. And I wanted this truth not to hurt, not to destroy, but because I needed my son to see what I was seeing, that he knew who he was protecting, who he was letting into his life like a weed. And if he was to blame, that he would at least look into my eyes honestly. As I closed the notebook, I felt something strange. It was no longer fear. It was a quiet, firm force which grew slowly, the strength of those who finally understood that they deserve respect. And it was in the middle of this thought that my phone vibrated. A known number. "Michael," I answered in a calm voice. And it was himself. That came the sentence that paralyzed me. And when you know what he told me on that call, you'll understand why I was never the same again. I returned to their house the following Sunday, as if returning to the battlefield, pretending that it is just another ordinary day. I put on my cream coat, prepared a simple apple pie, and walked slowly to the gate, taking a deep breath to keep my heart steady. When Emily opened the door, she had that same trained smile, and Michael came behind, adjusting the collar of his shirt, looking like a boy trying to please. I went in, complimented the smell of the food, offered help in the kitchen, cut salad, set the table. I did everything as I always did, because I knew I needed that whole set intact for the right moment. And the moment wouldn't be during lunch, nor during conversations about work, nor when Emily started telling about the can't-miss offers she'd found that week. The moment would be when silence was on my side. We spent some time talking about amenities, and I watched Michael's every gesture, the way he looked away when Emily talked about her father, the way he squeezed his napkin when I brought up the subject of accounts. It was as if he carried a weight that he couldn't admit even to himself. I felt my heart crack a little more with each lie told naturally, but I stood firm, with a straight spine and a soft voice. I hadn't gone there to scream. I had gone to open a door that they had been trying to lock for years. When the clock passed 3 in the afternoon, I got up slowly, saying it was time to go. Emily collected some dishes, and Michael walked me into the living room. It was then that I stopped, took a deep breath, and looked straight into his eyes. He was surprised. I was used to seeing myself quiet, good, docile, but at that moment, I was another woman, a woman who knew. Michael, if someone told you that Emily lied to you for years, would you believe it? I asked in a low, firm voice. He froze. First he laughed, a short, nervous laugh. He tried to make a joke. I said something like, "Mom, what is this story?" trying to dispel the heavy air that formed. But I didn't back down. I didn't look away. He noticed. "Did you know that your father-in-law's office doesn't exist?" I continued. This time, the color disappeared from his face, as if I had pulled a cloth over it. The smile died on his mouth. He didn't say anything. He just stood still, breathing fast, his hand shaking slightly. I saw in his eyes the exact moment when the facade fell. Not entirely, but it cracked. And when it cracks once, it is no longer what it was. That's when Emily walked into the room with a tea towel in her hand, asking if everything was okay. Michael turned his face at once, as if she couldn't see what was happening. But it was too late. I had no turning back. I walked to my bag, unzipped it slowly, and pulled out the blue notebook. I put it on the table, between the 3 of us, as if putting a mirror in the center of the room and forcing everyone to see themselves. "If you want to know what's here, call me," I said. "But don't lie to me ever again." The room became so quiet that I heard the ticking of the clock hanging on the wall. Emily held the cloth tightly, as if trying to maintain some composure. Michael seemed to be trying to speak, but no words came out. I just took my bag back, arranged the notebook in the center of the table, like a warning, like a door ajar, and I walked to the exit without looking back. When I touched the doorknob, I felt the weight of that moment spread across my body. I knew they had stayed there, paralyzed. They knew that in that notebook there were dates, proofs, memories, truths that they never thought I could put together, truths that could dismantle everything. And as I closed the door behind me, one certainty accompanied me down the stairs. That was only the first crack, because what would come next? It would be too big for them to hide. The question that remained in my mind was only one. When does the mask start to fall? Who tries to hold her first? Michael or Emily? When I got home that Sunday, I calmly closed the door, hung my bag on the hook, and stood in the hallway for a few seconds, feeling the quiet air envelop me like an old blanket. I knew that I could no longer live in the shadow of that lie, and I also knew that if I left space, they would try to pull me back into the role of silly blind mother that I had played for so long. So I did what needed to be done. I picked up the phone, opened the contacts, and blocked Emily's number, without hesitation. Then I called Michael, not to talk, not to hear justification, but to make a clear message. When I hit the voicemail, I spoke slowly, without a tremor in my voice. "Don't look for me until you know who you really are." And I hung up. At that moment, I felt as if I had given something back to myself. I don't know if it was dignity, peace, or strength, but something came back to occupy the space that was once just pain. In the days that came after, I disappeared, on purpose. I packed my bags, packed 2 changes of clothes in a bag, and took a bus to my sister's house in Toledo, Ohio. She was surprised when she saw me at the door, but she didn't ask any questions. He just hugged me, and I allowed myself to rest inside that embrace, as I hadn't done in many years. There, I met 2 friends from my youth, walked in the park where I played when I was a girl, and sat on a bench to look at the lake, as if I were finding a forgotten part of me again. The silence that once crushed me was now my shield. I didn't owe anyone anything. For the first time in a long time, I breathed guiltlessly. Meanwhile, my phone vibrated nonstop. Long messages from Michael, some confusing, others desperate, trying to explain, justifying attitudes, saying that I had misunderstood, asking me to talk again. Did I read them all? No. I only saw the first stretches. It didn't open. He did not answer. I needed him to miss what he let slip out of carelessness, not out of punishment. but because absence teaches what presence sometimes hides. He always thought I would be there, available, ready, understanding. But now, if he wanted to talk to me, he had to come as a man, not as a boy cowering behind someone else's lies. I went back to sewing. I remember picking up an old quilt that I never finished, full of scraps with different colors, and while stitching the fabrics, I realized that my life was also like this, pieces that I tried to put together to make sense. And there, with the line running between my fingers, I understood that some parts don't fit because they were never meant to be together. It was in this calm that something inside me took root. I was in no hurry. I was not afraid. I only had myself, and at that moment, that was enough. Michael's messages stopped arriving on the 4th day, and it was this sudden silence that showed me that something had changed, not only in him, but in what lay ahead. Because when someone used to hiding finally stops talking, it's because the truth has started knocking on their door. And when I returned to Grand Rapids a week later, the truth was waiting for me too, only in a way I didn't imagine. You know that kind of truth that comes in like a cold wind, pushing away everything you thought you ever understood? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. And I'll tell you, because what I found on my doorstep, it wasn't just a message. It was the first proof that it was all going to collapse much faster than they thought. When I returned home after that week in Ohio, the first thing I found was an envelope pushed under the door. It was not a bank letter, nor market propaganda. It was a printed email. I immediately recognized the far-fetched, almost dramatic way that Emily used when she wanted to look like a victim. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened it slowly, and read each line with a calmness that even I didn't know I had. "You are destroying our family because of baseless suspicions," she wrote. "Michael is devastated. I'm hurt. His removal is cruel." I kept looking at those words and realized that, for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt sorry. Sorry for someone who thought he could manipulate me with guilt, when I had already seen the whole truth face to face. I folded the paper, put it aside, and did not answer. I had said enough. The afternoon had barely passed when I heard loud knocks on the door. The voice that came after, I would recognize this one even in the dark. "Michael, Mom, please." Opens. "We need to talk." I was silent. He hit harder. "I know you're there. I need you to listen to me." I walked to the door, leaned my forehead against the cold wood, and took a deep breath. It was not time. Not yet. I took a small piece of paper, just wrote, "It's not the time," and I went under the door. He cried. I heard. He cried as when he was a boy and was afraid of the noise of the storm. But I could no longer open that door on impulse. This time, I was the one who decided. Michael stood there for almost 20 minutes, crying softly, apologizing that I could no longer decipher. When she finally left, I sat on the couch staring at the carpet, feeling a bitter mixture of love, disappointment, and strength. A strength that I had never felt before. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing after my son's love. I was taking care of my own love, the one I'd forgotten for nearly 40 years. The next day, I met Lisa at the church. She called me in the back room, where she usually organizes clothing donations. He took out of his bag a light blue briefcase, with dozens of papers. "It's all here," she said. "The full report, transfers, the deposits, order patterns, everything organized and dated." I felt a chill run down my back, not out of fear, but of reality taking shape. Lisa continued, "If you want, you can initiate a partial return request. It has a legal basis." I kept looking at the paper, but my head was far away. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was something bigger. It was dignity. It was to be seen. It was to show my son the truth about the life he was living without realizing it. I closed the folder slowly. "I still don't know if I'm going to file anything," I said, "but I know that I will never be used in the name of love again." Lisa smiled slightly, as if recognizing when a woman finally raises her own spine after years of hunching over. I walked back home slowly, feeling the cold Michigan wind hit my face, and I thought about how curious life is. Sometimes it takes us years to learn to say, enough is enough. And when you learn, a peace that you didn't even know existed begins to spread through your chest. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it. But even in that peace, I knew Michael's silence wasn't going to last long. Because when someone loses control, try to recover anyway. And that's exactly what happened days later, in a way that made me freeze inside. Because that night, who knocked on my door? It wasn't Michael. It was someone I never imagined seeing there. And what he said, I would change everything again. I agreed to go to lunch at my sister's house because something inside me said it was time. Not to solve, but to see. To see what was left of my son after the truth began to knock on his door. My sister's house has always had that smell of coffee with cinnamon and old wood, the same smell of our childhood. When I entered, she hugged me as if she already knows that there is something heavy in the air, even though no one told me anything. The table was set simply: roast chicken, potato salad, homemade bread. I sat by the window to breathe better, because my chest still hurt in a strange way, as if there was too much space in there. Michael arrived late. He entered with his body hunched, his shoulders heavy, his gaze lost. The unshaven beard showed that he had not slept well for days. My sister realized right away. She always had this nose for other people's sadness. He saw me and stopped for a moment. I just said, "Hi, Mom." I replied with a soft nod. It was all I could give at that moment. Sit. Food was steaming on the platter, but no one seemed hungry. The conversations started timidly. Work, neighbors, winter coming strong that year in Ohio. But the mood was suspended, as if all the words hanging in the air were waiting for a fall. Until my sister, always direct, put her fork on the plate and asked, "What's going on between the two of you?" The whole table was mute. Michael swallowed, and I took a deep breath. I looked him in the eye and asked very slowly, "Do you want to tell, or would you rather I tell you?" His hand trembled. His face lost all color. It was like seeing a boy in front of his own shadow. He got up so fast that the chair dragged on the floor. She ran her hand over her face and said, her voice cracking, "I was blind, Mom. Forgive me." The silence that came after that sentence was different from all the silences I have ever experienced. It was not a silence of accusation, nor of sorrow. It was a real silence finally coming after knocking on the door so many times. He took a deep breath and began to speak like a man who was plummeting, but finally plummeting to the right side. He told of Emily's lies, of the ready-made stories she used when she wanted to manipulate. She said that she never knew about half of the requests for money she made on behalf of her father, who only found out when he started to poke around, after I handed her the notebook. He said that he felt ashamed, imbecile, trapped in a life that he thought he was saving, when in fact he was the one who was being devoured. He cried, but it wasn't pretty crying. It was rough crying, really tearing. My sister looked at me with moist eyes, but I remained serene, not out of coldness, but because for the first time in many years, I didn't have to scream or justify my pain. I just needed to listen. Michael talked about how she controlled everything, the hidden money, the purchases that he believed were a gift from her mother. He talked and talked, like someone who opens a clogged closet and drops everything on the floor. And I just thought, my God, he was just as imprisoned as I was. In the midst of all that confession, I felt a strange peace, a peace that we only feel when we realize that the truth, as painful as it may be, liberates more than it destroys. That's why I say, and I say from the heart, stay with me until the end of this story, because the deepest moment, the one that changes everything, is yet to come. You will understand, when I tell you, why this lunch table has become the turning point of my entire life. When Michael finished speaking, he sat down again, covering his face with his hands. I put my hand on the table, not to console him, not yet, but to show that I was there, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because I needed to look into my son's eyes and see who he had become when the lies fell. He lifted his face and stared at me. There were no more defenses, just a broken man, asking to be seen. And I saw it. I saw the whole truth. But what he told me afterwards, when we are alone on the balcony, away from everyone, it was something no mother expects to hear. And it was this revelation that changed everything that would follow. Are you ready to know what he confessed to? The one thing Emily still tried to hide until the last second? Because it was there, on the balcony. That history has taken a turn that even I didn't imagine. As we stepped out onto the porch of my sister's house, the cold Ohio wind slammed into my face, as if it wanted to keep me awake, present, steady. Michael was by my side, but he seemed smaller than ever. He held the iron grate so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Mom, I need to tell you something I hid out of shame," he said, his voice so low that it almost blended in with the noise of the trees. I was silent, waiting. I found out that my father-in-law falsified reports. He and Emily, they created stories of expenses, exams, crises, everything to justify asking me for money, and for you. My heart beat slowly. He continued, "I found hidden papers, lists, values, and even a draft of how she was going to ask you for the loan of the gas. She rehearsed, Mom." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I only heard the wind dragging dry leaves across the yard. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. I just felt a part of me, the part that blindly believed, saying goodbye to him, that version of him that I tried to protect for so many years. When I opened my eyes, he was looking at me with his face destroyed. I let it happen. I let you be used. I didn't see anything. I put my hand on his shoulder. It was all I could give at that moment. "Now you can see," I said, "and that's what matters going forward." The days that followed were like a silent earthquake. Michael went back to Grand Rapids before me, and from what I understand, the truth exploded inside his house like a bomb. He confronted Emily with the evidence, with the reports, with the lies. She tried to deny it. Then he tried to cry. Then he tried to accuse. But when he realized that the mask had fallen, he tried the last resort of the culprits, to become the victim. It didn't work. Michael asked for a separation. They said that she screamed, that she tore up papers, that she begged at the door of the building. But he was decided. The farce was over. As for his father-in-law, disappeared. It disappeared from Grand Rapids like smoke in the wind. Someone commented that he took the SUV and went to Illinois, where he had contacts. But we soon discovered, from Lisa, that these contacts were more legend than fact. He had no job. There was no consultancy. He had only a false address, a P.O. box, and an enormous ability to manipulate good people. Everything fell apart because finally someone had the courage to look the truth in the face. Emily still tried to reverse it. He sent letters. He sent messages. She said she had been misunderstood. He said that it was all to protect the family. He said that Michael didn't understand his pains. But the evidence was many. They were evidence that came from the past, the present, and even what she tried to hide in the future. And when the truth refuses to die, no one can bury it. Michael moved out. He left that expensive neighborhood, that house full of facade, and rented a small apartment near the center. He started therapy. He started working fewer hours, cooking for himself, paying his bills for real. He began to learn to live without masks. Sometimes she called me saying, "Mom, I'm ashamed of everything I've done." And I answered calmly, "Shame is the first step. The second is not to repeat it." We talked little, but we talked truthfully. And that, for me, was worth more than any request for forgiveness. I started to observe everything from afar, with prudent eyes. He was in no hurry. He had no urgent emotional needs. I was learning to live for myself again. It was as if the silence that once oppressed me was now my firm ground, my shelter, my way of taking care of myself. I started walking in the park early in the morning. People began to greet me with more respect, perhaps because they had heard fragments of the story, perhaps because they had seen my posture. I was never in the headlines. I never told anyone anything, but somehow, the way I carried my dignity spoke to itself. And it was during this period that I realized something profound. I didn't win by raising my voice, not even exposing anyone, nor making a scandal. I won by living. I won by continuing. I won by refusing to be destroyed for what they did to me. Life has these ironies. When the lie falls, the one who was quiet is the one who remains standing. Gradually, Michael returned to visit me. He arrived with simple flowers, with breads that he learned to bake, with short but sincere conversations. He was no longer the man who repeated Emily's ready-made stories. It was a son trying to rebuild himself. I received each gesture with serenity, not with euphoria, not with anxiety. Take it easy, because I knew that true reconciliation doesn't come from haste. It comes from transformation. But one thing was still missing: a conversation, not about Emily, nor about his father-in-law, but about what was really at the center of it all. And when that conversation finally happened, it was like opening a window that had been closed for years. And what my son told me that day, It was the last piece of the puzzle, the piece I never expected to hear, the play that would change not only the past, but everything that would come after. You know, that kind of revelation that changes the way we see even love itself? That's that. That was the one that was coming, and I had to prepare, because it didn't come light. She came to turn my life around one last time, but this time, for the better. I never imagined it would get to this point. You know, all my life, I've lived in service to others. I had my moments, of course, but they were rare. Now, as I look back at my new home, I see that for the first time, I was the one who chose it. I didn't choose it out of convenience, nor out of obligation. I chose it because I wanted to. And if I could give one piece of advice to those who listen to me now, it would be, never underestimate the power of a new choice. I went to South Haven with a simple goal, to find a place where I could take refuge, where the pain wouldn't find me every day. I knew I had given enough to the world, to others, but the last part of my journey was one that I could only do on my own. And it was there, in that little town near Lake Michigan, where I finally found my space. A small, simple house, with enough to call my own. And it wasn't just the house that drew me in, but the sense of freedom it represented. Every corner of it now had a little piece of me. The garden I planted with my own hands, the quilts I started making to sell on the internet. These were all small things, but they gave me back control of my life. The cat was a surprise. I've always been more of a dog, you know. But as I walked through the adoption shops one day, that gray and white cat look got me. He was different, shy, but there was something about him that told me he would be perfect company. His name is Charlie, and he soon understood the dynamics of the house. I laughed at the way he tried to hide under the table when he first heard the sound of the vacuum cleaner, but it was from him that I learned the real meaning of unhurried companionship. We don't need to say anything. He was there, quiet, sharing the same space, the same tranquility. Over time, things began to change. What was once a deep and constant pain now turned into a peace that was difficult to describe. I'm not sure how it happened, but all those mornings of silence began to be filled with things I never knew were missing. I tried, at first, to write, but I couldn't put the right words. So I started making the quilts. It was something simple, but it made me feel productive, creative, and above all, in control. Every thread I sewed, every print I chose, gave me a sense of satisfaction. Michael still came to visit me from time to time. Not much, but whenever he appeared, he brought flowers. It was never a long visit, but I already knew what he wanted. He came looking for advice, for something to calm his soul. He sat in my garden, on the same bench where I already spent the mornings watching the sun, and talked. He didn't talk about what happened, or about Emily, or about his mistakes. He talked about the little things, how work was going, how he tried to get better every day, and I listened. I always knew that my mission was never to prevent others from making mistakes, but to help them learn from them. At one point, he said, with a sadness in his eyes, "You know, Mom, I've never seen you whole. I've always been the focus, and you annulled yourself, for love. Now I see what you have become, and I feel lost, as if the mistake had been mine." And I just looked at it. He said nothing, because he was right, but maybe he didn't understand how much I needed something that was just mine, just me. And there's never been a clearer moment of that than now, in this house, with the garden I've planted, with the quilts I'm making, with the cat that's purring next to me. I found my own refuge. If you could see what I see now, feeling the tranquility of the place, the sound of the waves gently crashing against the shore, you would understand. I found more than one home. I found peace. I found myself. Sometimes Michael asks me for advice, or says he's doing well in therapy. He strives, and I see it. But right now, I don't pressure myself to be the source of everything. He can go, he can come back, but I will no longer be that mother who sacrifices herself. I love my son, but first, I learned to love myself. Now what's next? I don't know. But what I can guarantee is that I will never allow my story to be written by someone else again. I'm the one who will write the remaining chapters. And for sure, the next chapters of my life will have more laughter, more freedom, and more choices made by myself. This is something that no one can take away. But will he really be able to find himself, now that the truth has come out from under the lies? Will he be able to rebuild trust? Or will it be too late? I do not know. But I know that if he truly loves me, He'll learn to respect me as the woman I am now, and no longer as the mother he thought I would always be. And in the end, when time passes and he looks back, it will be my story that he will see, not the story he imagined. For many years, I believed that to love was to give until it hurts. I thought that true love was the one that leads us to make sacrifices, that always puts others first, without measuring the consequences for ourselves. But today, when I look at the horizon of my backyard, where the flowers grow unhurriedly, I know to love is also to know how to stop. It is to understand that, to continue truly loving, you need to respect yourself. The woman I am now is not the same one who cried alone, afraid of being unfair. The woman I am now has courage. Courage to look the truth in the eye, even when it is difficult to accept. The love I offered was often accepted without gratitude. I believed that the lies were out of love, that the mistake wasn't really the mistake, that everything could be justified. But the truth, it always finds a way to emerge. And when it comes, you realize that the biggest lie was believing that love had to cost so much. Today, I can say with a lighter heart, I have freed myself, not out of revenge, but out of wisdom. I didn't scream. I didn't slam doors. I didn't make a scandal. I just walked away and let the truth speak for me. And she spoke loudly, without haste. I know that you, who have listened to me this far, must have felt something inside you. Maybe you've been through something similar, or met someone who has experienced a dilemma like mine. The pain of loving without limits, of giving without receiving, of trying to understand what is going on in the head of those who are dear to us. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, can it help me carry it forward? Like this video and sign up, and let's make this story reach those who need it. I keep thinking, maybe this story was told to reach you, there, on the other side of the screen, precisely because some piece of it touched something in your heart. Life has a curious way of teaching us what really matters, and I want to thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for having accompanied me on this journey. It's good to know that, even from a distance, there are people who, like me, have gone through so many struggles and continue to move forward. With your company, my path becomes smoother. I hope you found something valuable here, and if you haven't signed up yet, do it now. When you sign up, it's like an invitation to come back to the next cafe, sit down with me, and share one more story. Now tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. Let's create a community of hearts that understand what it's like to fight for something true. So, if you haven't activated the bell yet, do it, because that way you don't lose it when the coffee is ironed again. And if you still have room for one more story, don't go yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.